All right, this is the Big Douglas Show, another fantasy football edition. And from the NFL Network, we have Adam Rank today. Adam, thanks for hopping on with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I didn't know when I came on, Doug, and I saw the background. I know you're an FT fan, and Scott looks like Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I'm like, are we talking FT? Because I'll talk FT, but fantasy's good too. But but most of all, I'm just excited to be on with the both of you.
I'm excited, Scott. We've been trying to do this one for a little bit between the two of us. You are up there in Washington, and I know you've got the Run the Sim stuff going. Maybe the busiest man in fantasy football land is Scott Simpson. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well, Big Doug. Thank you for the invite. This is an honor to be on your show and then to be able to talk to Adam. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm really excited. And thanks for plugging Run the Sims. I can't wait to win so much money this year. Gambling, fantasy football, and DFS with Run the Sims. My wife doesn't know how much I'm going to win. I'm not going to tell her.
I'm curious, who gets the credit for the best ball? Is that an underdog thing they came up with? Because I know everybody is onto the best ball now.
Yeah, who does? Who does get the credit for that? Because I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't mean to cut. Not enough to keep me from cutting you off, but I love it. I think it's so great, and I'm going to do one. I'm doing a draft. I won't plug who it is. They don't need it. They don't need to intrude on this show. But whoever it is a genius, and I want to buy them a craft beer or a soft drink of their choice.
Hell yeah! I think it was draft.com a couple years ago, who was eventually purchased by FanDuel, but then FanDuel didn't use that feature very well. They didn't market it very well, and so I think the creators of draft.com got back together, and then they created Underdog to kind of fill the void that was left when FanDuel scooped them up, but didn't really use them effectively. So I'm excited to play. And Adam, I'd love to play wherever you're at, whatever site you're playing. I'd love to play against you and Doug as well.
Yeah, let's make that happen. Sorry, Doug. Look at me stepping over the host as always. I'm so sorry, Doug.
No, please,
my apologies.
There are no rules here. We'll just chop it up, and whatever happens, it'll be grand and glorious. I was thinking about this earlier. Maybe it was just like a little blip that happened. Nobody does defensive players anymore, do they?
I mean, I still have one league where we go DST or IDP, excuse me. And I don't know. I like it. And then it's just more guys. It's just more guys you have to worry about on the injury report. I think it comes down to not laziness, but I think that on Sunday morning, and a lot of us play in multiple leagues, and it's tough. You want to make sure that you're up to date with all the injuries. And then when you're doing an IDP league and your starting safety is out and you're like, son of a gun, like it just is so maddening at times. So it's not a laziness thing, but I think at some point you got to kind of like, it's like similar to what's happened during the Pandy, which by the way is a phrase I'm trying to get over. So instead of pandemic, we call it the Pandy. But during the Pandy, you started to kind of, drawing your friend circle a little closer. Like who's really necessary now? Who can be on the outside fringe? It's like a big alliance in Big Brother, and there's an 8-person alliance, and it's like at some point, we're gonna have to start picking each other off. And I feel like that's the way our friends have been. Where you're like, I'm not going to see you. Like already you just dropped the list. You're like, you have kids my age? No, gone. No disrespect to them, but like they have different lifestyles. Like they want to go, like I got to golf like it's 6 a.m. and I got to play a 3.5 hour round and I got to get back before the kids get back from school or whatever, or take them to school or do whatever. So it's no disrespect to them. And then you have friends who are single who are like, let's play at 3 p.m. I'm going to go get a 12-pack of Michelob Ultra. I'm like, I can't do that. You're an insane person. And similarly, there's a point here. It's at some point, Doug, I'm getting to it. Believe me, I'm getting to it. Similarly, with your fantasy leagues, you do that. You have your league of record, the one that you probably started with your buddies years ago. Then you have a couple of them. You got a couple work leagues and everything like that. And then eventually it just gets watered down and it gets neutered. And I think, and this goes back to our conversation about best ball, is that best ball is great because you're like, I'm done. I do the ones where you draft and I'm like, I'll see you in week 18. See how I'll shake your hand then. See how it all worked out. But, but IDP is just one of those formats where I've just been like, you know what? Love you, IDP. Like, we had a great time. I remember the time that IDP and I went out to Vegas. We're up at 4 a.m. at the Fremont bar doing Jaeger bombs with a girl I'm pretty sure was Trishelle from the Real World Las Vegas. But you know what? At some point, those days are over and I've moved past it. And I bet that when you asked this innocent question, you didn't expect this random answer. But, that's what we get.
It was a short-lived love affair with IDP.
A little bit. But nothing but respect. I still have some of the photos on my camera roll, but you know what? It's time to move on.
I'm going to say that I agree with Adam because last year I did so many leagues, so many people invited me in to do leagues. I did over 40 leagues and I didn't do them well. And in one league, I got to the championship and I didn't know I was in the championship because I had so many leagues and I forgot to actually set my lineup and I would have won the championship, would have won a couple $100. So like I had to get rid of like 25 of my leagues. I kept one IDP league, just one, because it is like Adam said, it's a bear. It all is a bear, especially on Sunday morning for me, where I'm just trying, like Adam said, monitoring all the injuries, trying to get all the offensive players in and out of my regular lineups, my DFS lineups. It's hard to be like, oh, Micah Parsons isn't going to play this week. I got pull him out and put a new linebacker. It's tricky to do, but I'm not going to hate on it because I'm in one. I'm going to win that one. I got third last year. So
let's get to some actual stuff on the, not the field. I always have trouble switching from talking about ball and then talking fantasy football because the two aren't exactly the same. Every year I convince myself I'm not going to draft a quarterback early. And then I'm selecting like 9. And I'm like, oh man, what do I do here? And I always take a quarterback. I'm curious where you guys stand on drafting quarterbacks. Because it's funny, on the field, most important position, not necessarily the same thing with fantasy football.
Well, one of the things that has made the quarterback position relevant in fantasy is playing in the super flex leagues where you have the ability to flex a quarterback. That'll raise the quarterback's values once again, because anybody who tries to get away with the late round QB strategy is going to probably not win. And it's one of the fun things about the Scott Fishbowl League is that it's the first introduction for a lot of people to super flex leagues. And you can tell because they'll be going through and it's the first 3 or 4 rounds. And they haven't drafted a quarterback. And you're like, oh brother, like you are not going to like your team. And I did that in a dynasty startup. I did the riskiest thing in a dynasty startup with Kyle Yates this year. And I took Justin Herbert as my first quarterback. And I actually went 2 rounds without selecting a quarterback. And I took Kyle Pitts because this was a startup. And my feeling was, look, if he ends up being the next Tony Gonzalez or Travis Kelce, then I've got that position on lock for the next decade. So to me, it was worth it. And then in the 3rd round, I did something stupid, I'm sure. Oh, I took Justin Jefferson, young receiver. Like, of course I'm going to take him. And then in the 4th round, I'm like, I just sitting there and I was watching and I'm like, I got to take a quarterback here. And I ended up with Zach Wilson. And I thought, honestly, that's not the worst pick. I'm like, this could actually be a pick that works out well for me, but it's very risky. But I think in most leagues where you are playing in a 10 to 12 team standard league or redraft league, it is still the best case scenario to let those quarterbacks tumble. I picked Tom Brady in the 9th or 10th round today in a redraft league and was very comfortable with that. I mean, if you look at his statistics after, week 7, I think over the last 2 months of the season where he had 30 some odd touchdowns. He was like 2nd in touchdowns, 2nd in passing yards over the last 7 games, I believe it was. He had finally figured out the offense. And the one thing that you always notice about Bruce Arians is that he just loves to throw the football. He does not want to run the ball. So I ended up getting a pretty good quarterback right there. And still some of the quarterbacks available at that time, I think Tannehill might have still been on the board or Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow, which I know a lot of people are hesitant about, but you still have Trevor Lawrence, one of the 2 rookies with Justin Fields or Trey Lance. I'm like, you're fine. I would wait on a quarterback.
I continue to say I think Lance is going to start for San Francisco day 1. I just, it feels like he's got experience with RG3 from 2012, and they spent a whole lot of capital. How do you look at the position when you've got a guy like Garoppolo there also? I mean, just stay away from both of them, or you're picking Lance just knowing he's getting on the field sooner than later?
I don't know what Scott thinks, but personally, I'm going with Trey Lance. I really don't have an issue with Jimmy Garoppolo because honestly, every time that he's healthy and available, he's played pretty well. The problem is his availability. The year that he was healthy and he played, 16 games, they went to the Super Bowl. The last couple of years, he's been nicked up. I mean, even in his limited time in New England, he battled some injuries when he took over during Tom Brady's 4-game suspension, because I believe, I hope I have this correct, is that, he missed a couple games and Jacoby Brissett had to start too because he was injured. So I can't trust it. I'm just going with Trey Lance. I'm not picking him as my starter, but I'm picking him as a backup, number one, in case he is the starter at the end of the year. And number two, if you looked at the 49ers playoff schedule, it's amazing. And I know this stuff changes all the time, but they play the Texans. I think if there's one thing that I can look into the future and see, it's that the matchup against the Texans is going to be pretty well. Like, that's going to be fine. Like, that's one I can count on. Like, even the Detroit Lions, let's say something crazy happens with Dan Campbell and that team's actually relevant. Like, okay, like things like that happen. The Texans are the team that I feel the safest about being like, they're probably not going to be very good. So I'd be very comfortable starting Trey Lance if he's the starter, even over, I'm not going to say over Tom Brady because I made that mistake last year, but I still think that Trey Lance is going to be a viable quarterback in the second half of the season.
I'm not going to disagree with Adam on any of these points. And I'm going to double down on his points too and say in Scott Fishbowl, I took Dak Prescott with my first pick, and then I took Aaron Rodgers with my second pick. And so I feel like if you're going to play super flex, you need to have, if you're going to punt on quarterback, fine, that's fine. You're punting on it. But if you're going to really try to win with the best quarterbacks, get two of them, because you can start two of them. And a lot of these super flex leagues I drafted in during the pandemic, the Pandy, as Adam was saying.
The Pandy, thank you.
I like it, the Pandy. We're going to bring that into existence now, the Pandy. I have Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen on my team, or I have Tom Brady and Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott, because I was trying to load up. And most of those teams I made the playoffs in just on the back of my two strong quarterbacks. Not Dak, obviously got hurt, but I think Adam's exactly spot on. And I would say I normally don't in redraft, Doug, take two quarterbacks. I just grab one. But because of the pandemic and because of what's happening, it's kind of with COVID-19 and the fluidity of player health, I would definitely grab two quarterbacks this year. And if you're going to grab Trey Lance, make him that QB2 who you expect by the end, like Adam said, to be your QB1, maybe a la Jalen Hurts at the end of the year, where he's kind of just, not really had a lot of tape on him yet. If he doesn't start, there could be the potential there to kind of catch defenses off guard. So I love everything Adam said, and put a double stamp from Scott on it.
You know what, Scott, if I can fire in on that too, that was a great point about taking a quarterback during an extra quarterback during the Pandy, because again, the availability can be so volatile. I mean, last year, Cam Newton was playing so well, and anybody who drafted him was probably laughing like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then he gets COVID, he's out. And, it's tough to stream. That was week 3 or week 4. And you had to really scramble because a lot of, that you're not in that mindset yet of like, I've got to stream my quarterback, because you don't want to do it that early in the year. Thankfully, I mean, a lot of us got lucky because that led us to Justin Herbert. But at the same time, it is really a tricky business. And I think that it's best to go out and take a second quarterback this year. Take a second tight end as well. I know that's one that people don't love doing. They don't want to take that second tight end. I'm grabbing second tight ends where possible. I've been doing a lot of Jonnu Smith and Evan Ingram because Evan Ingram's been falling in drafts. I also like Kyle Rudolph in that New York Giants situation too. I don't know. Something's got to give in New York. But I really love the idea of taking a second quarterback and a second tight end. And I'm trying to get people on board with that this year as well, Scott. So that's a great point.
Scott, it seemed like for a long time, everybody talked about handcuffs. And this year, I think the word of the day is stacking. Adam, you brought up New England. That might actually be a good three-person stack there, right? That the quarterback plays much better this year. And I'm also just curious some of the other stacks that you like this year.
Yeah, the stacks. I always love the stacks, and I've been going through waiting on a quarterback, which is what I love to do, and then letting the receivers that I get kind of dictate the quarterback that I'm going to end up streaming or end up trying to stack at some point this season. And usually it falls into the range of, it's difficult because I've been getting a lot of Keenan Allen. So it's like, it's impossible unless you're willing to jump in on Justin Herbert very early. It's going to be difficult to pull that stack off. But if you're drafting somebody like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase with, Joe Burrow. I know a lot of people are nervous about Joe Burrow. I will say this about Joe Burrow, though, for anybody who's been really nervous about it. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was even, I think it was as recently as last week, everybody was fading Saquon Barkley. Like he couldn't play football anymore. They're like, oh my God, like don't want anything to do with Saquon Barkley. And then on Monday the 9th, apparently he's off the PUP list already. So I caution anybody to not overreact to news similar to that. But I will go in and let my receivers, and it's usually not going to be one of my top receivers. I know, like if I have Allen Robinson, and I missed out on Justin Fields today and ended up taking Trey Lance, but yeah, I had Allen Robinson. So of course, the second quarterback that I took was Justin Fields. If I get Elijah Moore, the second quarterback that I'm going to take is going to be Zach Wilson. So I really just let the board kind of dictate if it's possible to get that late round quarterback. If I get AJ Brown, I'm definitely probably going to spend on Ryan Tannehill, things like that. So those are the most obtainable to me. I mean, anybody would love to have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. And I will tell you right now, buy in on that once again. Like Aaron Rodgers is going to have another fantastic statistical season. Buy in on all of that. But those are my three. So Stafford with one of his receivers, Burrow with one of his receivers, and Tannehill with AJ Brown, if it's possible. I like knocking that out.
I love that. I love being able to stack either your second quarterback or your second wide receiver. It's like a sneaky little stack, and it's not like best ball thinking, but it is kind of DFS best ball mindset of upside. You're trying to maximize upside in certain weeks and match up your players. And you mentioned Zach Wilson, rookie, of course, but Elijah Moore, rookie as well, has been making waves in camp. And he's somebody who I'm targeting. I think I drafted him on all of my dynasty teams. And so I really love Elijah Moore. I don't know if I'll be stacking him primarily in redraft with Zach Wilson. There might be better quarterbacks available, but in DFS and in best ball, those guys are great plays if you can get them.
Is Austin Eckler just a name recognition problem? He's really high on boards, and I just never even seem to think about it when it comes to drafting. What is it with him, do you think?
Well, he averaged in the games when he was healthy, he averaged close to, I think it was 93 scrimmage yards per game. And if you take away week 4, the week that he got hurt, it's over 100. And I think that's what the people are really looking at. Obviously, Keenan Allen's going to be their top targeted player, as he should be. And after that, it comes down to Austin Eckler. They got rid of Hunter Henry. I'm not a big believer that Jared Cook is going to go out there and all of a sudden become this superstar tight end. I think he's a very viable player for some matchups. And really, you look at the number 2 wide receiver for the LA Chargers. I know people want to go into the Mike Williams. I like Taylor, I think is the guy. Was it JJ Taylor? No, that's New England. That's New England's running back. But there's another, was it Johnson? Gosh, dang it. Sorry, his name escapes me. Tyler Johnson. Yeah, that's the guy. Tyler Johnson, who's a player, like a best ball player that I love. And to me, Austin Eckler is like their number 2 pass catching weapon, in addition to being a solid runner. Obviously, the biggest question is going to be his availability. And I did, again, not to go back to a mock draft that I did today, but I think it was Aaron. I know it was Aaron Jones. And then in the second one, I was expecting Austin Eckler to fall to me. The guy who actually fell was Jonathan Taylor, where you're like, okay, weirdos, I'll take him. And that worked out great. So Yeah, Eckler is good, but the injury concerns are there, but I still think that that's with every running back. So I think that when you're looking at a share of the offense, there aren't going to be a lot who are going to get more than Austin Eckler. So I think that he's kind of a safe pick at the end of the first round.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Adam. And you look at what Joe Lombardi was able to do with Alvin Kamara, and he didn't make Kamara into who he is. You know, I mean, he's an amazing athlete, but he showcased him and gave him an opportunity. And sure, Drew Brees couldn't throw the ball downfield very far, and so there was a more designed around the line of scrimmage and maybe 10 to 15 yards beyond. But I still think that Lombardi coming over really does benefit Eckler. And Adam, I love him. I actually have him as my 5th ranked running back in PPR league. So ahead of Zeke, ahead of Nick Chubb, ahead of Jonathan Taylor, all those guys. There's a lot, like you said, there's a focal point in the offense. It's Keenan Allen. And then after that, it's Austin Eckler. Mike Williams, I don't know if he can be trusted necessarily with his injury history. Mike Williams is great. He plays like balls to the wall every single game, kind of like Kittle does. He goes up for balls. He just does whatever he can, but there's attrition on him. He gets hurt. He does. It happens. So we'll see if he can be healthy, but I love Eckler, and I'm drafting him at the end of the first round every time. And if I can get him with like Nick Chubb or Najee Harris or Antonio Gibson, I feel like I've got a real strong stack of running backs to kind of start my draft.
You brought up Nick Chubb, and I'm curious what the numbers show. Like for a guy like that has a number 2 running back in Kareem Hunt that they use, how does it affect the shares and the usage? And should that be scaring you off a guy like Chubb?
I mean, I'm not scared of Chubb right now because last year he only had like 180 carries and he was injured, but I think if he gets closer to 250 carries, he's not going to see a lot of passing work. But if he's got that above 5.5, 5.6 yards per average, he's just going to be chewing up the yards. And I also think that the 11 touchdowns that Kareem Hunt had last year, some of them passing, some of them at the goal line, there's going to be some regression for some of those touchdowns, maybe not the passing ones, but maybe some of the rushing ones. And so I think Nick Chubb can also increase his touchdown equity this year. And I'm not saying he's going to be ahead of Zeke and all those other people, but as an RB10 or 11, I'll take him. I really like his week to week upside. And if you can go get Hunt later, if you're worried about it, you can get Hunt in the 8th round and you want to stack that. Not the worst thing you could do. If one of them gets hurt, you got the number 1 running back, maybe in the NFL. So we'll see.
Especially on a team that likes to run the ball as much as they do in Cleveland. Kevin Stefanski has built an offense around the solid offensive line, which Pro Football Focus ranked as number 1 coming into the season. That's what they want to do. And that's why it hurts guys like, Odell Beckham Jr., where him and Jarvis Landry are great players, but they're just not going to go out there and put up the fantasy production that you want them to, which is fine. Sometimes you got to seed the real football and just allow it to play the way that it does. And if that defense is good, and it looks like it's going to be pretty good, they brought in Jadeveon Clowney to pair with Myles Garrett. Goodness gracious. All of a sudden you have a team that's going to be running the football a lot. So I like both of those guys as long as the price is correct. Like I agree with Scott. Like I'm not drafting Nick Chubb in the first 5, but if I'm at the end of the first round and I want to go running back, and I ended up with Austin Eckler and Nick Chubb as my 2 starting running backs, I'd feel pretty comfortable with that.
I'm curious, 2 things. If you guys have a favorite football team, and does spending so much time just absorbing the league by players make it less attractive to root for a team, or do you find yourself not rooting for the team as much? I'm curious.
That's a difficult question. I think that if your team sucks, I think it makes it easier. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. And so there are some years where you're like, yeah, I'm mostly concerned with my football team, or with my fantasy football team, I should say. But now with Justin Fields, like, oh my God, my fantasy team comes second. But in honesty, I still have, because I have monitors up, I have multiple monitors, I have a phone. And depending on whether I'm in the office, last year, we did everything from home. So I have a big TV that was always tuned to the Bears game, that had the Game Pass Bears game. I had a computer monitor that was on the Game Pass Red Zone. I had another game on my computer, and I had another game on my phone. But I'm always paying attention to excuse me. I'm always paying attention to what's going on with the Bears. So the Bears are the priority. And then it's always the red zone's there. And then 2 games, like I said, usually I'm either stacking somebody or I've got, if I'm starting Joe Burrow, a lot of people probably weren't watching a Bengals game, but like I had Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or whoever. Well, the Chargers would usually play late anyway, so it didn't matter. But, yeah, I don't think it takes away from it. It's just something that's additional to it. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, I'm going to see Rancid in concert, but I also like the Dropkick Murphys. I can still enjoy both, but I'm still there to see Rancid, and sometimes my team has played Rancid. So the analogy checks.
I was gonna say those are great band call outs. I love that. I'm gonna agree with Adam on this again. Sorry, I'm just agreeing with him so much, except that I don't have a team anymore. Doug knows this. I used to be a Washington football team fan, used to be a season ticket holder. Since I was 5, I'm 42, so 37 years old. So when I was maybe 10 years ago or so, I was a season ticket holder. And then the Washington football team just did not care about their fans very well. I don't need to document it. If you're not a fan, you maybe don't know all of it, but it was not a great fan experience, and it hasn't been for a long time. And so about 7 years ago, I just quit my Washington football team, as hard as that was, as frustrating as that was, and I went full fantasy. I'm in love with every player, and so it has not diminished. For me, it's made it so that every game I'm rooting for greatness. I want everybody to score touchdowns that I have. I want big scores. I'll go into a game, maybe let's say Rams and Seahawks, and not have a favorite. And then as the game develops and just what the players do, I go, oh, I want the Seahawks to win. And then if they win, great. If they don't, who cares? I'm still going to cash because I had DK Metcalf in my DFS lineup. So maybe it's myopic and selfish, but pulling away from my fandom has, I think, helped me personally love everybody in the NFL. And I don't hate any players, or I'm not against, like the Cowboys. I used to be against them. I'm not against them. The Cowboys are great. I love CeeDee Lamb. He's amazing, and I want him on my team. So it's just a change of mindset for me. But I did wish I still was a Washington football team fan. But that ship sailed. So
you can go back at any time. You better do it before they get really good, because then you're going to be in trouble.
Say that the organization is actually, to their credit, done and is doing a ton to reach back out to fans and kind of say, sorry, we know we have to, please come back, and we're got new people in the building. But let's
water bottles. Sorry, this one I had to sneak water bottles into the stadium to avoid paying $30 for like just water to drink and to live during the game. So I was like, this is killing me. So,
that's garbage. I know going to Angel games. I live in Southern California. So I know going to Angel games, we can bring in water and you can bring in food. I have small children, but we still, pay up. But the audacity to not let somebody carry in a water bottle. Although the weirdest thing with Angel Stadium is that you can't bring in the aerosol spray, like the aerosol suntan lotion. It's just that I think that's probably every stadium, not just an Angels thing, but it's great because I never bring lotion, especially to go to day games. And when we get there, there's so many leftover bottles of people not knowing and then having to leave the air. And I'm like, come here. And I'll bring my little daughter up and I'll spray her down and I'll spray myself down. And the security guards just laugh. But I do believe with the fan thing, like I don't know how I do it, because last year I did have Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. I picked Aaron Jones in a mock draft today. I just feel like at some point I have that ability to divorce myself from the, like, I want this person to lose, but I also can be a realistic enough of a human being to understand, like, this guy is actually good at football. So it would be dumb not to take advantage of it. So I don't know. It's kind of like it's kind of like being friends with the kid in your neighborhood who sucks, but he's got a pool. So you're like, I got to kind of be nice to him so I can get invited over, because I don't want to be left out. But, when his parents go on vacation, we're going to drain it and skate in it. But, you still are, I'm awful. I make myself sound terrible. Like, listen to me. Like, what have you learned about me today? Like, I'm an awful person, like cutting out friends. I'm being friends with people because I have a pool. Like, this is not a good look for me. I might need to bounce. No,
the pool guy made it into the final 8, huh?
Yeah, they made it. They made it to the alliance. Like, oh, we got to keep Aaron around because he's got the pool.
Well, let's wrap with this. It is a Washington football team podcast. Let's talk about some of them on there. It's interesting. I didn't realize this for all the excitement about Logan Thomas. I think 4 touchdowns last year. I think the fantasy football community is high on him. I'm curious what you guys think about where he's headed this year.
I'm sorry, who was the name?
Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas, man, I like him. Like, I really do. I've always kind of liked him. And I know it's cool that he's back in the DC area. Is that fair to say? You went to Virginia Tech, right?
Yeah.
So I think I've always kind of rooted for him. I know when he was in Arizona, he's a tight end in Arizona with Bruce Arians, which means he's never going to catch the ball. And I mean, like, honestly, like, it was a miracle that they were throwing to Gronk and Cameron Braid and everything last year. But I do believe that there's some ability there. And again, when you're looking at the tight end position, and I've kind of looked at it this way, and this was kind of a trend that I was on a few years ago, where I was drafting Travis Kelce in the first round because the drop off from Kelce to the next guy is enormous. And even last year, as great as Darren Waller was, and he ended up as the tight end too, through weeks 11 and 14, he had some volatile games that were not great before he finally leveled off and played very well. I just really feel that and now everybody's in on the gag, like everybody's in on it now. So everybody's targeting Kelce and Kittle and Waller. So I've kind of had to go the other way to where I'm probably not going to get Travis Kelce unless he falls to me in the second round. And then you got to kind of, then I'm done. I'm done with the position. Like, they will be, I took Younghoe Koo before I took Jonnu Smith today. So it's just one of those things. And I will take a chance, and keep an eye, and depending on how big your roster is, looking at guys like Logan Thomas, like, who can pop for me? Who can come out of nowhere? I know last year everybody was in on Blake Jarwin. That blew up. And it was Bob Tunyon who ended up emerging. So there's going to be somebody like that this season. And I know it's so easy to look at Ron Rivera and that offense and be like, well, Greg Olsen did well. You're like, yeah, but Greg Olsen, kind of a superstar, by the way, one of the worst trades in NFL history. By God, that was the dumbest thing. I know that they did well when him and Cutler would have been so great together. But in any event, Logan Thomas, I like him. And I think, again, when I'm doing best ball, when I'm doing some other things, he's definitely one of my targets.
Yeah, I'm with Adam too. He finished as a tight end 3 in PPR last year, behind only Kelce and Waller, and he only had, I think it was 6 touchdowns, so close with 4, only 6. Only had 670 yards. So if he can get maybe up to 800, maybe 850 yards with a pass, maybe a more pass happy quarterback or more consistent quarterback, let's put it that way. Somebody who likes to get the ball, move the ball downfield. Alex Smith was not a great quarterback in the last couple of years. Even before he got injured, and did the remarkable comeback, he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. He wasn't. He was throwing 25 passes, 17 of 25 for 130 yards, or some crazy number that you're like, this isn't really what a quarterback should be effectively producing at the level that we're in the NFL now. So I think with Fitzpatrick, who, thank you, Adam, that you say that I resemble. I call myself Fats Patrick, just so people get confused. I'm a little chubbier than Ryan, but I do think that Logan's upside is, again, tight end 5, up there in that top range. It's going to be hard with Kyle Pitts and Hawkinson and some of the other guys who might get more volume this year, just in their offenses. They might have a bigger role, but I think his touchdown upside is more like 10 this year than it is 6. And so we'll see. Maybe he can't get those 10, but I do like him. And if you can get him in the 8th to 10th round of your drafts, maybe 9th to 10th round, you're not missing out. You're not reaching for a tight end. I think you're kind of in the right value range for Logan Thomas.
And the other thing I'm always curious about is, take a guy like Terry, who had a really good year last year, is primed for another good year. But you add, a Diami Brown and a Curtis Samuels, and all of a sudden there's more, people to throw balls to. How does that end up affecting wide receiver 1 on some of these teams?
Yeah, that's one of the players I'm concerned about, not in an ability standpoint, because obviously he's a great player and I think that he's got a lot of ability, but I think that when there's just so many options for this football team, the one guy that I really like is Antonio Gibson. And I think that he's going to grow his role this year. A lot of people, obviously not you, Doug, but a lot of people are sleeping on the fact that he was a receiver in college who came in and played running back. And so he's only going to get better and he's only going to learn more parts of this offense. And so to me, I always like to see who's going to be the focal point of this offense. Sometimes it's the receiver, sometimes it's the running back. If it's a high volume offense, okay, that's really not going to matter. Washington, as Scott was talking about, is not necessarily the most prolific offense. And even with Fitzmagic this year, even if Tyler Heineke's playing, whomever it is, I don't know that they're going to be this high profile offense. So I really look at Washington as a team that I like as a football team. I think they're good. But for fantasy, the only guy I really like going after is Antonio Gibson, except for JD McKissick, super late. But Antonio Gibson's the one where I'm like, okay, now that his toe injury is seemingly behind him, I feel very comfortable with him. But I think every time that I see Terry McLaurin, I see him in the neighborhood with Allen Robinson or even Keenan Allen sometimes. And you're like, I like you. And if you were even if you were the number 2 in Green Bay or something crazy like that, I would feel very comfortable with you. I just don't think that there's going to be enough volume there. So I tend to pivot off Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, and he's being drafted right now as the wide receiver 10, and he finished last year as the wide receiver 20. So that is a big jump. Not that it can't be done, but it's a big jump. Last year, Doug, I don't know if you read it, but I wrote an article called The Wide Receiver 2 Theory, and it looked at the gap between wide receiver 1s on team and wide receiver 2s, and where they finished was not indicative of how they were drafted, and to the point where 30 to 40% of wide receiver 1s that are drafted as wide receiver 1s didn't return that yield on their own team. And so Terry McLaurin is somebody who I think he's going to have a good year. But for him to be number 10, that's the top of his value, maybe not the very top, but that's one of the top outcomes of his ceiling in that offense. And, to your point, I'd much rather have Allen Robinson, who's getting 150 targets. That's just ridiculous, and then I think Allen Robinson is a better receiver than Terry McLaurin as well. He hasn't dropped anything. The guy has never anything in his whole life, and so except maybe a huge tip. He drops huge tips. Let's just put it that way. But I want Allen Robinson in the 3rd round every single draft. And if I can get him in best ball or redraft or whatever it is, I'm going for Allen Robinson this year.
Well, let's wrap with this, guys. Scott, why don't you tell the people at home where to find you and what you got coming up next?
Oh, man, I appreciate it. You can find me. I've got 3 different podcasts that air weekly. Fantasy Millionaires are on Monday tonight at 10 o'clock. So check out Twitter, check out YouTube, Nimble W Numbers, Fantasy Millionaires on both for YouTube and Twitter. And then tomorrow I have a show with the Fantasy Football Hot Stove with my partner, Jamie Calandro from Fan Team Advice. We have Lindsay OK coming on. Love Lindsay. Really excited to chop it up with her. And then on Friday, I'm going to be in California visiting Bo McBrayer, my podcast partner on Chalk Block. And we have the man, the legend himself. I'm very excited. Mr. Field Yates is coming on our show.
Ooh,
and,
very nice.
It's going to be a good time. Please check me out there. And then I'm on Twitter all the time, and I'm in Underdog Best Balls all the time too. So, and hopefully I can, Adam, by the way, I have to say something. I want to watch football with you because that's how I watch football, with 6 different screens with 8 different games on them. I've got different picture-in-picture games. I'm watching every single one glued to it. So I can hang out and have some craft beers with you, my friend.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I would love to do that. We, back in 2019, we'd finally built this fantasy lounge and it was so much fun. We had the big screen in the middle, which was always, it was always the red zone. And then we would always, I always had the Bears in upper left. And then I kind of ruled the room. I know there was a Ravens fan and a Chiefs. Well, Timmy Checks is a Chiefs fan. So Chiefs are fine because we all have fantasy shares there. And Marcus is a 49ers fan and they're always a 1 o'clock game, 1 o'clock West Coast, of course. And so we would always pick those other 2 games and it's just a lot of fun. And I still have a phone out and everything. So we should knock it back. The only problem is at work is you just don't have the beer situation that you can have out front, but whatever, we make it work somehow.
And Adam, did I see you're on TikTok now? How's that going for you?
Oh, bro, like I'm trying to edit this TikTok mock draft right now, and it's driving me crazy. And the 20-year-old who goes to Loyola Marymount is trying to help me over like a Zoom call ourselves. Like, how do I do it? Like, this is it. Like, I got my phone out. I've got extra phones. So yeah, so TikTok's been a blast. I've already liked it. And so I've already noticed, and probably because the Tanners haven't shown up yet, but like there's less haters on TikTok so far. I mean, there's still it's still a bunch of adolescents. So they're going to be somewhat mean, but not like Twitter and Instagram. It seems more positive. So hopefully if the positivity although I want to drop one too, because I know that there was some like baseball podcast who was talking about like Shohei Ohtani needs to leave the Angels. You're like, bro, they're just about to be good and you want to get rid of them. Like, I know they're struggling, but it's the Salt Lake Bees that are struggling right now. All the stars are injured except for Shohei and David Fletcher. So back off. But in any event, catch me on TikTok at Adam Rank. That's the only thing I'm going to plug. Like, what, YouTube? Or, no, I don't care. Find me on TikTok because I want you to embrace TikTok with me. I'm way too old for that app, but you know what? I'm embracing the hell out of it.
Nah, I went over there and checked out some of those videos. They're great.
Thank you.
Well, fellas, I appreciate you coming on today. This was a whole lot of fun, and we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, yeah, please do. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.